Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are actually doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, a slightly different approach for this one.
Right, because we aren't just, analyzing a concept from the outside. We are physically putting you, the listener, right in the seat.
Which is really the best way to understand this stuff.
Exactly. I want you to imagine you are strapping into a single-engine aircraft, maybe a Cessna 172 or a Piper Archer. The door is latched, the headset is on, and the engine is just idling in front of you.
That's right. We're running a simulation today. We are going to walk through a technical brief regarding the normal takeoff and climb.
And I know that sounds standard. I mean, planes take off literally every day, but we are going to break it down with the scrutiny of a senior flight instructor who is preparing a student for a check ride.
Because it demands that level of scrutiny.
It really does, because when I was looking at the stack of research for this, we've got the FAA's Airplane Flying Handbook, the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, and some fairly intense advisory circulars. I realized I've been completely oversimplifying this in my head.
Most people do.
Yeah, I always thought takeoff was just, you push full power, you pull back on the yoke, and up you go.
Right. That is very much the passenger view of what's happening.
Yeah.
And honestly, that mindset is exactly how accidents happen.
Just yanking it into the sky.
Exactly. If you just yank and bank, you are completely ignoring a really complex negotiation of aerodynamic forces.
That's not just driving a car into the air.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The takeoff is arguably the most dynamic phase of flight. You are transitioning from this heavy ground-bound tricycle into a flying machine, and it all happens in a matter of seconds.
And the stakes are incredibly high, right? Because the accident data shows that a huge chunk of general aviation mishaps happen right here.
Right during the takeoff roll and the initial climb.
Yeah.
It's a very high workload environment, and you're very close to the ground. So our mission for this deep dive is to completely dissect the standard operating procedure.
So not just the motions.
Right. We aren't just talking about how to move the controls, but why the physics demand those specific movements.
Okay, so let's get right into the cockpit.
Let's do it.
We've done the run-up. The magnetos are checked. The oil temperature's in the green. We call the tower, and they say, cleared for takeoff.
The magic words.
We taxi onto the runway. What is the very first thing going through your mind as that senior instructor sitting in the right seat?
Alignment.
Just lining it up.
Just alignment. It sounds totally trivial, I know, but it sets the tone for the entire maneuver. The Airplane Flying Handbook, the AFH, is very specific about this.
Right.
You want to use all available runway.
So no shortcuts.
Exactly. You don't start your roll from an intersection if you have the ability to back taxi to the very end. You want every single inch of asphalt right in front of you.
Because, as the old saying goes, you can't use the runway behind you.
Precisely. It's completely useless to you. So you line up perfectly on the center line. And right here is a very specific physical technique that I drill into absolutely every student.
Okay, what is it?
Heels on the floor.
Heels on the floor. Okay, I've definitely heard this mentioned in the source material, but why is it so critical right at this moment?
It really comes down to anatomy and aircraft ergonomics.
Okay.
In these standard tricycle gear aircraft, the brake pedals are actually the top half of the rudder pedals.
Oh, so it's all just one unit.
Exactly. It's one piece of metal. If you're nervous, or maybe your seat is adjusted a little bit too close to the panel, and you have your heels up resting on the pedals themselves.
You might be stepping on the brakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You might be inadvertently riding the brakes the whole time you're trying to accelerate down the runway.
So your hand is pushing the throttle for full power, but your toes are secretly slowing you down.
You're literally fighting the engine.
That seems like a bad idea.
It's terrible. It increases your takeoff distance dramatically. It heats up the brake pads, which can lead to brake fade when you actually need to land later, and in a worst-case scenario.
What happens?
Well, if one foot is slightly heavier than the other, you get severe directional control issues. You might start swerving hard to the right when you desperately need to be going straight.
So the explicit instruction is heels down on the floorboard, toes on the bottom of the pedals.
Right. You steer the nose wheel with your toes.
Yeah.
You do not slide your feet up to the brain portion until you are actually ready to stop the airplane.
Okay, got it. Heels are down. We are perfectly aligned on the center line. Now, the power application.
There we go.
In the movies, the pilot always just jams the throttle forward to the wall. Is that what we're doing?
Definitely not. Please don't do that.
So no dramatic shoving.
The AFH strongly advises a smooth, continuous advance to takeoff power. I always tell students to think of it as a 3-second count.
Like 1, 2, 3, full power. Why the hesitation, though? I mean, if we want to fly, why not just get going as fast as possible?
Well, there are two main reasons. First, you have to think about the engine itself.
Okay.
You don't want to shock the fuel system with a massive, sudden surge of fuel and air. That could actually cause the engine to sputter or cough right when you need it most.
Which would be terrifying.
Highly undesirable. But more importantly, it's about aerodynamic control.
How so?
If you jam the throttle forward instantly, you are unleashing a massive amount of torque all at once. The airplane is going to react violently to that.
And I'm guessing that reaction isn't to just go perfectly straight down the line.
No, not at all. This introduces what I call the battle for control.
The battle for control.
The sooner that power comes in, the airplane is going to try its hardest to veer off the left side of the runway. The Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, the PHAK, officially calls these the left-turning tendencies.
Ah, yes. This is a classic part of ground school. It honestly feels like a conspiracy of physics.
It really does.
Everything about the plane just desperately wants to turn left.
It's true. There are technically 4 distinct forces at play here. But for the takeoff roll itself, we really need to focus on the big ones. First up, you have torque.
Good old Sir Isaac Newton.
Newton's third law in action. The engine and the propeller spin clockwise from the pilot's perspective looking forward. That spinning is the action.
So the equal and opposite reaction is?
The airplane itself wants to roll counterclockwise, or to the left.
So the whole airframe is trying to twist. Does that mean the left tire gets pushed down into the pavement harder?
Exactly. It compresses the left strut. More weight on that left tire means more friction and more ground drag on the left side.
Which makes the plane want to pivot left.
You got it. So that's force number 1.
Okay, so Newton is actively pulling us into the left-hand grass. What else is fighting us?
Next, you have the spiraling slipstream. This one is actually really cool to visualize.
Let's visualize it.
The propeller isn't just pushing a neat column of air straight backward. As it spins, it's actually throwing a corkscrew of wind completely around the fuselage.
Like a literal tornado or vortex wrapping around the body of the plane.
Exactly like that. And because of the specific geometry of the airplane, that fast-moving corkscrew wraps around and physically strikes the left side of the vertical fin.
The tail.
Right, the tail fin.
So this mini tornado hits the tail hard on the left side, which obviously pushes the tail over to the right.
And if the tail gets pushed to the right...
the nose swings left.
Exactly. It acts just like a weather vane.
Yeah.
So now you have torque rolling you left,
Yeah.
and the wind spiral yawing you left.
It's a double whammy.
And it gets better, because as we start to pitch the nose up a little bit later in the roll, a third player enters the game. P factor.
P factor, also known as asymmetric loading.
Yes.
I always found this one the hardest to explain to people. It's so counterintuitive.
It is, but it's much simpler if you just think of the propeller blades as wings.
Because they basically are wings just spinning.
Yeah, right. They are airfoils. When the airplane is sitting at a high angle of attack, like sitting on its main gear with the nose pitched up as we try to lift off,
Yeah.
the blade that is moving down on the right side of the arc is actually taking a much bigger bite of the relative wind than the blade moving up on the left side.
Because the right blade is swinging forward and down into the incoming airflow, and the left blade is kind of retreating away from it.
Essentially, yes. The angle of attack for the descending right blade is higher, which means the right side of the propeller disc produces significantly more thrust than the left side.
So the engine is basically pulling harder on the right side of the nose.
Exactly. Since the pull is completely off-center to the right, it yaws the whole nose abruptly to the left.
Wow. It's honestly amazing we managed to fly straight at all. You've got friction, corkscrew wind, and uneven thrust, all conspiring to drag us off the runway.
It is a lot of physics. But the antidote to all of this complex aerodynamics is incredibly simple.
What's the secret?
Right rudder.
The pilot's absolute best friend.
You just have to apply positive physical pressure on that right pedal. But here's the trick. It's not just a static setting.
You can't just push it and forget it.
No, it's a dynamic dance.
Yeah.
As you slowly add power, you need more right rudder. As your airspeed builds down the runway, the rudder actually becomes more aerodynamically effective because there's more air rushing over it.
So you might actually have to back off the pressure a little bit.
Exactly. You have to constantly adjust.
The AFH explicitly mentions over-controlling as a huge common error here. Why do so many people struggle with that?
It's a feel thing. Because at the very start of the roll, you're moving slow. The rudder feels mushy and unresponsive. There's no ambient air moving over it yet, just the prop wash.
So it feels like it's not working.
Right. So students tend to stomp on it to get a reaction.
Mm.
Then suddenly the plane jerks to the right, so they panic and back off entirely, and they end up just weaving back and forth down the center line.
Like a drunk driver.
Basically, you have to mentally transition from steering with the nose wheel like driving a car to flying the tail with the aerodynamic rudder.
Okay, so we are dancing on the pedals, keeping it perfectly straight. The engine is roaring. We need to actually verify that the machine is working, right? We aren't just looking out the windshield the whole time.
Right. The airman certification standards require a positive check of the engine instruments during the takeoff roll.
So a quick glance down.
Just a glance. You are looking to confirm. Airspeed indicator is alive, and coming up, RPM is static. And in the green arc, oil pressure is good. You are verifying that the engine is actually delivering the power you need to leave the ground safely.
Okay, everything is green. The speed is really building now. The runway is starting to blur a bit.
Yeah.
Now we get to the moment of truth, liftoff.
The rotation.
And this isn't just a subjective pull back when you feel like it kind of thing. We are looking for a very specific number on that airspeed indicator.
We're looking for VR inner rotation speed.
VR.
It is calculated very specifically for your aircraft's weight and configuration on that given day.
So let's say for our Cessna 172 today, that number is 55 knots. The temptation, and I think literally every learner pilot feels this, is to pull back early.
Oh, absolutely.
You just want to get away from the ground. It feels fast. It's noisy. Why not just pull back at 45 knots and get it over with?
That is a critical error. The handbook officially calls it premature rotation.
What actually happens if you do that?
If you haul the nose up before the wings are moving fast enough to generate sufficient lift, all you are doing is presenting the entire flat belly of the wing to the oncoming wind.
You're basically turning the sleek wing into a giant barn door.
Precisely. You are creating massive amounts of induced drag.
So instead of accelerating into the air, you act like a parachute.
Right. So instead of speeding up, you start dragging. You increase your ground roll distance significantly.
Yeah.
You might literally run out of runway because you're just too impatient to wait for the proper speed.
And there's a physical risk to the airplane too, right?
No.
A tail strike.
Oh, definitely. If you yank back early and aggressively, you can drive the tail tie-down ring or the tail skid directly into the asphalt, sparks flying, metal bending.
Not a good way to start a flight.
But there is an even more subtle danger that catches a lot of people. Ground effect.
Ah, the invisible cushion of air.
Right. When the airplane is very close to the ground, usually within one wingspan's distance, the air gets compressed between the wing and the runway. This drastically reduces induced drag.
Making the plane feel super buoyant.
Exactly. It feels like it wants to fly. So if you rotate early, you might actually pop up into the air. You'll feel the bump stop and think, hey, I'm flying.
But it's a total trap.
Oh, it is a deadly trap. Because as soon as you try to climb out of that magical cushion, say 20 or 30 feet up into the air, the normal drag fully returns.
And because you pulled back early, you don't actually have the proper airspeed to support flight outside of that ground effect.
Exactly. The plane simply sinks. You will settle violently back onto the runway, or even worse, you'll mush along, struggling to climb, and eventually hit the trees or obstacles at the end of the field.
So the absolute ironclad discipline here is wait for VR.
You have to wait for it. When you hit that exact number, you apply smooth, continuous back elevator pressure.
You aren't jerking it into the sky.
No. You are just lifting the nose wheel to a specific, predetermined pitch attitude on the horizon.
And you just let the wings naturally take the weight off the wheels?
Exactly. The plane will fly itself off the ground when it's ready.
Okay, we've hit VIR. We rotated smoothly. The wheels finally break contact. The rumbling stops. We are airborne. We are officially in the initial climb.
Now the entire focus shifts. We need to navigate, and we need to climb efficiently.
Now, navigation right off the runway seems simple enough, just point the nose straight. But the wind is always trying to push you around.
It is. So we use a visual technique called flying the extended runway centerline.
How does that work in practice?
The AFH suggests picking 2 visual points straight ahead of you in the distance.
Out the windshield.
Right. Maybe a distinct tall tree, and further back, a water tower or a barn. You establish a heading that keeps those 2 points perfectly aligned in your windshield.
Like lining up the iron sights on a rifle.
Exactly like that. By keeping them aligned, you naturally establish a crab angle into the crosswind. This ensures you track perfectly straight out from the runway rather than drifting sideways over a parallel taxiway, or worse, into a noise-sensitive residential area.
Okay, so we're tracking straight. Now let's talk about our airspeed again, because we aren't just holding our rotation speed, our VR,
Yep.
forever.
No, we accelerate.
We have two new best friends to meet, Vx and Vy.
These are arguably the two most crucial concepts in climb performance.
Vx is the best angle of climb,
Yes.
and Vy is the best rate of climb. This terminology honestly confuses so many people when they first read the PHAK, angle versus rate. What is the actual practical difference in the cockpit?
The easiest way to think about it is obstacles versus time.
Okay, explain that.
Imagine there's a menacing 50-foot wall of pine trees right at the departure end of your runway. You do not care about how long it takes to get to altitude. You only care about the geometry of clearing those trees.
You need to go up as steeply as geometrically possible.
Exactly. That is Vx, best angle. It gives you the absolute most altitude gain for a given distance across the ground.
So it's basically the elevator mode.
Right. To achieve that steep angle, Vx is usually a slower airspeed. You're pitched up quite high. But let's look at the other scenario. Let's say there are no obstacles. You are taking off from a massive runway pointing right over the open ocean.
The path is totally clear.
Right. In that case, you just want to get up to your safe cruising altitude of, say, 5,000 feet as fast as humanly possible.
And that is where Vy comes in.
Yes. Vy, best rate, gives you the most altitude gain for a given amount of time. It's a faster airspeed than Vx. The nose is lower. It gets you up to your cruise altitude quickly and very efficiently.
So on a standard everyday takeoff, do we just pick one of those speeds? Or do we use both?
We actually sequence them.
How so?
The standard, safest procedure is to rotate and immediately pitch to hold Vx initially.
Even if the runway is clear.
Usually, yes, or whatever the manufacturer specifically recommends for a normal climb. You hold that steeper climb speed until you are absolutely certain you are clear of any potential obstacles. The FAA usually defines that as passing 50 feet above ground level.
So safety first. Guarantee you clear the trees before you do anything else.
Exactly. Once you hit 50 feet and the runway environment is clear, you gently lower the nose just a little bit.
Which reduces the angle of attack.
Right, which allows the airplane to naturally accelerate from Vx up to Vy. Once you hit Vy, you hold that faster speed and continue your climb all the way up to cruise altitude.
And flying at Vy is actually much better for the airplane's engine too, isn't it?
Oh, significantly better. Remember, Vx is a slow speed with a high pitch angle.
So there isn't much fresh air rushing into the cowling to cool the cylinders.
Exactly. Air-cooled engines need airflow. If you try to climb at Vx all the way up to 10,000 feet, you run a very real risk of overheating the engine.
Which is bad.
Very bad. Vy lowers the nose, increases the airspeed, keeps the engine temperatures much cooler, and as a bonus, it gives you much better forward visibility over the dashboard to look for traffic.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, I want to completely shift gears here for a minute.
Sure.
We've thoroughly covered the physical inputs, the feet, the hands, the specific speeds. But you mentioned right at the beginning that this is a technical brief from a senior instructor.
Yes.
A massive part of that role is safety and aeronautical decision-making.
This is truly where the professional pilot separates from the amateur operator. And it all starts before you even release the parking brake.
With the departure briefing.
The briefing. It is essentially a verbal contract you make with yourself and your co-pilot, if you have one, while your brain is still sitting on the ground, completely calm.
Because once an actual emergency starts,
Your cognitive ability instantly drops. You experience startle factor. You immediately revert to whatever your most ingrained training and instincts are.
so if you haven't explicitly briefed the plan out loud a minute beforehand,
You will hesitate. You'll spend 3 seconds wondering what to do. And at 200 feet, hesitation kills.
so let's run through the specific scenarios you brief. What is exactly on that checklist?
We break it down by altitude. Scenario 1. An aborted takeoff on the ground. This is any failure that happens while you are still rolling before you reach rotation speed.
So the engine coughs, or the oil pressure suddenly drops to 0, or maybe the passenger door just pops open.
Anything anomalous. The decision must be purely reflexive. Throttle immediately to idle. Apply heavy symmetrical braking. Maintain directional control and stop straight ahead on the remaining runway.
The rule is basically, if anything feels weird before VR, we absolutely do not fly.
We do not fly, period.
That seems logically very easy, but I know historically pilots really struggle with get there-itis.
They absolutely do. They have a schedule, they want to go, they rationalize the warning sign. You have to be ruthlessly disciplined.
Okay, so that's on the ground. Now, scenario 2. This is the famously dangerous one.
Engine failure immediately after takeoff.
You're at, say, 300 feet. You literally just left the ground. The
Right.
propeller stops. Complete silence.
This specific scenario is where the impossible turn comes into play.
The instinct, naturally, is to just turn back. The runway is literally right behind you. It's a safe, paved surface.
It's so inviting.
Why is attempting to turn back so incredibly deadly?
Because the physics of that turn are entirely stacked against you. Advisory Circular 6167 is absolutely brutal in its analysis of this.
Walk us through the geometry of it.
To turn back and line up with the runway, you aren't just doing a 180-degree turn.
Right, because if you just do a 180, you'll be flying parallel to the runway over the grass.
Exactly. You actually have to fly a teardrop shape to get back to the center line. So you are really turning maybe 210 or 270 degrees.
And you have zero engine power, so you are in a continuous descending glide.
And to make that teardrop turn tight enough to not fly away from the airport, you have to bank the wings very steeply.
And when you bank steeply?
Two critical things happen simultaneously. First, you lose a massive amount of your vertical lift vector, so your sink rate increases dramatically. You start dropping like a rock.
Okay.
Second, and more importantly, your stall speed increases exponentially as your bank angle increases.
So let me get this straight. You are very low to the ground. You're already flying slow.
Yes.
And by banking hard, you are actively increasing the speed at which your wings will quit flying.
Exactly. And the panicked pilot is almost certainly pulling back hard on the yoke, desperately trying to stretch the glide to reach the pavement.
Which increases the angle of attack even more.
Which is the final nail in the coffin.
Huh?
That combination leads directly to an accelerated stall, followed immediately by a spin.
And at 300 feet.
If you enter a spin at 300 feet, there is zero mathematical chance of recovery. You will impact the ground vertically.
So knowing all that physics, what is the senior instructor's golden rule for an engine failure right after takeoff?
Land ahead.
Land straight ahead, even if there are trees, even if it's a rough, plowed field?
Yes. The phrase we use is, urgency characterizes all power loss. You must lower the nose immediately to maintain best glide speed. You find the softest, most survivable thing within a very small, maybe 30-degree arc directly in front of you.
A field, a dirt road.
Even just a slightly thinner gap in the forest canopy. And you physically fly the airplane, completely under control, right into that crash.
Wow, that is such a hard psychological pill to swallow. You're having to intentionally crash your own airplane to save yourself.
It is terrifying, but it works. The airframe is an engineered cage designed to protect the occupants. The wings and the engine block will absorb massive amounts of the kinetic energy during the impact.
They crumple so you don't.
Right. If you fly it into the ground completely under control, you will very likely open the door and walk away. If you stall and spin trying to make the impossible turn, you won't.
Okay, that is sobering. Scenario 3 would be a failure higher up.
Right. If you are significantly higher, say above 1,000 or 1,500 feet, you might actually have the altitude to safely glide a circle back to the runway.
But that decision has to be mathematically pre-planned, right? Based on the wind in your glide ratio.
Exactly. It's part of the brief.
Yeah.
But below that critical 800 or 1,000-foot mark, the runway behind you is just gone. You have to mentally erase it from existence.
Before we wrap up this technical brief, I really want to touch on a fascinating psychological aspect you pulled from the notes.
Oh, the aviation instructor's handbook stuff.
Yes, it talks about a concept called reaction formation.
This is genuinely fascinating. We've talked so much about the hard physics today, but we'd absolutely have to talk about the pilot's ego.
How does psychology fit into a takeoff role?
Well, reaction formation is a classic psychological defense mechanism. It's where a person subconsciously masks their true internal feeling, which is usually intense fear or anxiety, by actively displaying the exact opposite outward behavior.
So wait, the pilot who is secretly terrified of the takeoff might overcompensate and act like a total daredevil.
Exactly. They might adopt what the FAA categorizes as a macho attitude, which is officially one of the 5 hazardous attitudes in aviation.
So how does that manifest in the cockpit?
They act completely invulnerable. They might rush through or joke around during the critical pre-takeoff checklist. And when cleared, they slam the throttle forward to the wall instead of advancing it smoothly.
They are just desperately trying to prove to themselves or to you sitting next to them that they aren't scared.
Right. And that specific psychology is incredibly dangerous because that particular pilot is far, far less likely to execute an aborted takeoff if something goes wrong.
Because aborting feels like a failure.
Aborting feels weak to them. Stopping the plane feels like publicly admitting the fear they are trying to hide.
Wow.
So they will actively press on into a clearly deteriorating situation, a rough-sounding engine, a wildly swinging airspeed indicator, or a nasty crosswind, just to maintain that false mask of confidence.
That is profound. It really shows that true aviation safety isn't just about having great stick and rudder skills.
Not at all.
It's about emotional honesty with yourself.
It truly is. The absolute bravest, most professional thing a pilot can ever do is pull that throttle back on the runway and say, you know what, something doesn't feel right. We aren't going today.
Having the pure discipline to just say no go.
Precisely. Because once you lift off, your options vanish. The runway behind you is useless, the altitude above you is useless, and the fuel still sitting in the truck is useless.
But the decision to stop.
The decision to stop is always useful right up until the exact millisecond those wheels leave the ground.
Well, we have certainly completely unpacked the takeoff today. From the literal friction on the tires to the torque twisting the engine, all the way up to the deep psychology of the abort decision.
It's a beautifully complex maneuver when it's done right. It's really a symphony of physics. You just have to know how to be the conductor.
So to recap everything for our listeners as they mentally unstrap from the simulator today, keep those heels firmly on the floorboard to keep the brakes totally free.
And use incredibly smooth 3-second power application.
Respect those left-turning tendencies with a very active right rudder foot.
And whatever you do, do not pull back until you see VRR. Avoid the deadly temptation of early ground effect.
Once airborne, pitch for VX to safely clear any obstacles, then relax it to VY to cruise up efficiently and keep the engine cool.
And always, always brief the emergency out loud before you take the runway. Know exactly where you're going to put the airplane if the sudden silence comes.
And if you're low, do not turn back. Land straight ahead. Just fly the plane all the way to the ground.
Live to fly another day.
I think I'm honestly going to look at every single commercial flight takeoff differently now. It's not just a plane going up, it's a highly calculated transition of energy.
It really is the best part of flying.
Well, thank you all for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep studying, keep respecting the physics, and fly safe. We'll see you on the next one.
Safe flying, everyone.